Colts quarterback Anthony Richardson is back up to QB7 in Dynasty leagues. We'll try to explain why on this episode of the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast.
You are Locked On Dynasty Football, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. Here are your hosts, Marcus Mosher and Kate Madjuk.
Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. This episode is brought to you by Prize Picks. Go to prizepicks.com/LockedOnNFL and use promo code LockedOnNFL, all lowercase, to win $50 instantly when you play $5. Welcome back. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. Joining me today, as always, is Kate Madjuk. You can follow her on Twitter at Kate Madjuk. On today's show, we are taking a look at the latest batch of Dynasty ADP, courtesy of Dynasty League Football. And we're going to look at some ADP mismatches. And Kate, we have to start with the Anthony Richardson, which I had an audible gasp when I saw that he was quarterback 7 in Dynasty League Football, ahead of Jordan Love, ahead of Kyler Murray, ahead of Justin Herbert, ahead of 15 other quarterbacks that I won't name. Explain it to me like I'm 5.
I don't know if I can. Here's the problem. I agree that it feels like things technically look a little bit better, maybe since Anthony Richardson has come back from his benching. Definitely hasn't gotten like the Bryce Young treatment in terms of improved playmaking, but things have looked just, I think, a little bit easier. Like I look back to week 11 against the Jets, which I think everybody was expecting him to absolutely bomb that game. Like, was safer with the football, 272 passing yards. Like that was a really good game for him. 1 touchdown, no turnovers. But like the inconsistencies are still so wild. 4.5 yards per attempt in each of his last 2 games.
Oh my gosh.
On the year, completing 47% of his passes. And it's not like that's all from the first half of the year. No, over the last 3 games, 39.3%, 50%, 44.7%. Like that is not a viable starting quarterback. The adjusted completion percentage, absolutely terrible. The accuracy and the touch are still problems. I understand wanting to have hope in Anthony Richardson and maybe having a little bit more hope than you did before his benching right now. But I still don't know that you can go all in on Anthony Richardson based on what we've seen in the second half of the season.
So I will say I've been generally encouraged by his play since he's come back to the lineup. But if you watch the game against Denver, it was awful. It was awful. And I know
Denver's defense.
Denver does have a good defense, and the Colts have an easier schedule coming up over the final 3 games. So maybe he can get it going a little bit. We'll see. The more that I think about it, the more that I wonder, how in the world can the Colts justify having him be their week 1 starter again in 2025? That would be 3 years in a row. He has an injury history. He's not gotten better. I just don't know if you can convince the rest of the players on that roster, like, hey, come do this again. Hey, Michael Pittman, I know we're only going to complete 50% of our passes, but come on back and let's do it again. To me,
it's hard to rally a locker room around that.
And I think that's why they went to Joe Flacco initially, is they felt like they were losing the locker room. Flacco came in and played well for a game, and then it got worse and worse and worse. I guess I'm just having a hard time, Kate, believing that Anthony Richardson is going to be a week 1 starting quarterback in 2025. And if that's the case, if you have any doubts about it at all, there's no way that you can justify having him as a top 15 quarterback, let alone a top 8 quarterback in your dynasty rankings.
I think this goes back to kind of the evaluation of the traits that make him such a potentially high-end quarterback here in the National Football League. And obviously it comes back to his legs. But here's the thing, can't use your legs if you're not playing. And there are two reasons that we should be concerned about Anthony Richardson and his potential playing time, right? Like, it's not just the injuries. It's the fact that, like, is he going to be able to hold on to the starting job here? Really good at scoring touchdowns on the ground, and thank God for that. Or else we wouldn't be talking about him, as highly in the ranks as we are. But it still doesn't mean, like, this is when fantasy football and real life football come to a head for me in Dynasty, and when we need to more consider, okay, it's not just about the fact that he can put up these numbers with his legs, and yeah, maybe the game's ugly, but at least we get, the fantasy points out of it. Like, there comes a point in every player's, time where, like, okay, Sam Howell was a top 10 quarterback last year, but it was about as ugly as it could possibly get for a top 10 guy, right? Like,
Yeah.
league and backs just took a million sacks. I don't even know how he's still standing at this point. But like, there comes a point where maybe the fantasy scoring doesn't look so bad, but we need to reconcile the fact that, like, because of the on the field play in real life, there are ramifications for this player's dynasty value. And I think that's just what fantasy managers aren't really considering enough. I think we're still just a little bit disillusioned about, like, okay, well, if he can, score 18 fantasy points a game when he's playing this poorly, like, I have to go all in. I don't think that's the case.
So I think the Colts are going to have to make some type of change this offseason. They're not going to make the playoffs again. It's been another disappointing season. And there's only really three key people that you can change. It's either Chris Ballard, their GM, Shane Steichen, their head coach, or Anthony Richardson, the quarterback. And maybe it is the front office. Maybe Chris Ballard, who's been there a long time, he leaves. Maybe they move on from Shane Steichen. I think that would be a mistake. It feels like the easiest move here is to bring in some kind of veteran quarterback that's not 38 years old, 39 years old, like Joe Flacco, and at least give you another option in case Anthony Richardson doesn't develop. Maybe you draft a quarterback. Heck, maybe you sign Sam Darnold to a big contract, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But I guess my reservations just come on. I don't believe that Anthony Richardson is going to be a week one starter next year. My question to you is, Kate, where do you personally value AR? Because I'm sure it's not as a top 10 quarterback. When you get down to the names like Brock Purdy, Jared Goff, Tua, Baker Mayfield, would you rather have him than all of those guys for the upside? What's your thoughts here?
I mean, I definitely, you got to bump him pretty far down. Like, some names that I'm going to take ahead of him, even though maybe the ceiling's not quite as high. A Drake May, even CJ Stroud, who I've been extremely critical about, like Bo Nix, Brock Purdy, Jared Goff. I think all of these dudes are ones that I would rather have on my roster. Even Baker Mayfield at this point, who, again, I have 0 shares of Baker Mayfield in Dynasty because I did not see this trend continuing. Obviously had a lot of production last season. Wasn't sure if we were going to see that continue with the departure of Dave Canales. And it turns out that, like, I think this version of Baker is the real deal. Like, I would rather have all of those guys over Anthony Richardson right now, because I know maybe the ceiling isn't as high, but I do think that there's a decent chance that all of these guys will be starting quarterbacks for at least the foreseeable future. And I don't have that same faith in Anthony Richardson. I hope I'm wrong.
I hope I'm wrong. I want Richardson to work out, just to be clear, because I was a fan of him coming out of college. He seems like a really good kid. It's been a rough first 2 years of his career. He's dealt with injuries. He's been benched. There have been bright moments. You mentioned the Jets game. Hopefully we see a strong finish to the 2024 season. I'm just not counting on it at all. Kate, let's talk about my favorite player in the NFL and why I think his ADP is ludicrous right now. We will get to Rashee Rice next. This episode is brought to you by the College Football Playoffs. It's back and it's better than ever before. And with a newly expanded 12-team format, it's guaranteed to be better than ever, bringing you all the hard-hitting and high-flying excitement that you love. TNT Sports coverage of the College Football Playoffs begins on December 21st, starting with the College Football Playoff Kickoff Show presented by AT&T at 11 a.m. Eastern. Leading into our first matchup, it is the Southern Methodist University Mustangs battling the Penn State Nittany Lions at noon. Then the Clemson Tigers look to upset the Texas Longhorns in a showdown at 4 p.m. Eastern. Don't miss a moment of the action. Watch the College Football Playoffs presented by Allstate live on TNT, True TV, TBS, and Max. This episode is presented by Hillsdale College. Time is our most precious commodity, so don't waste it scrolling through the same mind-numbing content for hours and hours and hours. How can you spend your time wisely to improve yourself? How about with history, economics, the great works of literature? Our sponsor, Hillsdale College, is offering more than 40 free, that's right, free online courses, including Constitution 101, the meaning and history of the Constitution, Introduction to Free Market Economics, The Great American Story, A Land of Hope, and the Rise and Fall of the Roman Republic. All of Hillsdale's courses are self-paced so that you can start whenever and tune in wherever. Plus, you can go deeper with readings, quizzes, and discussions, or just kick back and enjoy the lectures. Go right now to hillsdale.edu/lockedon to enroll. There's absolutely no cost, and it's easy to get started. That is hillsdale.edu/lockedon to register. hillsdale.edu/lockedon. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We are discussing some mismatch ADPs courtesy of Dynasty League Football. And Kate, let's talk about my guy, Rashee Rice. I got one of his rookie cards right here. I'm a big Rashee Rice fan. Loved watching him play last year. I thought he had a chance, Kate, to finish as a top 5 receiver this year. And honestly, he was on pace to do it after the first couple of weeks this year before suffering the knee injury. Right now, he is being drafted as wide receiver 15 in Dynasty Leagues, 22 overall. And I think that is bonkers.
Absolutely bonkers. And again, this is probably coming from two of the biggest Rashee Rice fans and, big believers. Because, sometimes we can project certain concerns for a player. I think there were some concerns given the fact that okay, they brought in Xavier Worthy. They signed Marquise Brown. There was, I think, a big question mark about, okay, can he really maintain this role, lower A dot, this kind of zone beater who almost looks like a Travis Kelce out there. Is he really going to be able to maintain that role with all these extra weapons? And I think having seen this offense play out over the course of the year, I feel very, very confident that he would have maintained the same exact role that we started off the season with. A very
I think he would have had
strong
100 plus catches.
Oh, absolutely. Easily, probably. I'd say easily, but not easily.
Well, in hindsight, you wonder how different this Chiefs season would have been. I mean, they're 13-1, so it can't be all that worse. But what would this
14-0 though, maybe.
Yeah, I mean, what would the offense have looked like? Would we have all these concerns of Rashee Rice just doesn't try to chase down a Patrick Mahomes interception? Because they were really good to start the season on offense. And when you have somebody in the middle of the field that's that dynamic with the ball in his hands, it is really hard to stop. And with the development of Xavier Worthy, with Hollywood Brown coming back now in week 16, you wonder what it would have been like.
I mean, I think that's 100% true. And I don't think we'd have all these one-score games. I don't think
No.
we'd be talking about the Chiefs as a lucky unit right now. I think we'd be saying this is a good unit.
Yeah.
They do feel lucky. Certain games have tilted their way by a very fluky nature, and I don't think we'd be talking about them in that same way. So when I look at Rashee Rice and how integral he is to this offense and what I think they want to accomplish, yeah, Rashee Rice feels like he should be ranked pretty darn high, because any player with the potential for 100 plus catches in his respective offense should be ranked pretty darn high. Anybody that's going to get that many opportunities with a quarterback that is a game changer like Patrick Mahomes, especially if those are lower ADOT targets, which that's kind of turned into the player that Patrick Mahomes is right now.
Yep.
That is perfect for Rashee Rice's game. But let's talk about the elephant in the room. Let's talk about the knee injury. Let's talk about the disciplinary issues that could be on the horizon, because I mean, that's kind of got to play into this dynasty value, right? Like if I was talking about, players that maybe I want to trade for, but I'm not really sure, like Chris Godwin should be higher on the list, for crying out loud. He's wide receiver 41 because he's not going to be available the rest of the year. But let's be honest, I'm probably going to have Chris Godwin back in my starting lineup a lot sooner than I will Rashee
Yeah.
Rice.
Yeah. Let's talk about the knee injury first. It was a pretty significant knee injury. It has about the same timeline as a torn ACL. Now, theoretically, he might be available for week 1, right? Now, will he be 100%? Probably not. We've seen most of these receivers will take 18 to 24 months before they look like themselves again, right? But that's not the only issue with Rashee Rice going on. He also has a looming suspension, and probably a pretty long one, Kate. I think conservatively, let's say 8 games, probably. So you're going to miss him for at least half of the fantasy football season next year. Actually, more than half of it. So how valuable is a receiver that you can't play now, and then you're not going to be able to play in September, October, and November next year? And oh, by the way, it's not like he's 21, 22, 23 years old. He turns 25 in April. Again, not overly concerning, but by the time that he's going to be back to being a asset for your fantasy teams, he's going to be 26, which again, we're going to be looking at the 2026 season going into the final year of his contract. And who knows what this Chiefs offense looks like 18 months from now, right? It could, maybe Xavier Worthy turns into Tyreek Hill. Maybe this offense is not very good in general. Maybe it's awesome, and they draft another receiver that becomes the new Rashee Rice in the middle. Who knows? There's just a lot of uncertainty right now. And as much as I love Rashee Rice, wide receiver 15 is just way too high. I look at the guys behind him, Kate, whether it's Rome, Zay Flowers, George Pickens, Devontae Smith, probably not Jaden Reed, but all those other guys right there, I'm just like, yeah, I think they're all somewhat safer than Rashee Rice, even if they don't have the upside.
I mean, let's even consider a player like Jordan Addison, right? Wide receiver 27. I think we're going to see that go up in probably the month to come, but 22 years old. I was worried about like fluky touchdown scoring. It turns out I think the touchdowns just come from Kevin O'Connell, who's an offensive wizard. Like
in playing opposite of Justin Jefferson, that helps a lot too.
Yeah, that helps a lot. You're going to open things up. Having TJ Hawkinson, who also you can't ignore, working over the middle of the field. Like there's a lot of good things to like about, Jordan Addison, even if I wasn't,
No, he also has some looming suspension stuff as well.
Yes.
But I understand, like if let's say he misses 3 games, it's not that big of a deal. Like you can survive the first 3 games of the season. The first 8, the first 10 for Rashee Rice. Maybe Rashee only gets a 4-game suspension, and he's still not ready to go because of the knee injury. There's too many factors here with Rashee Rice that make me go like, hey, he should be valued as wide receiver 25, not wide receiver 15.
Yeah, I think that valuation seems pretty fair. And again, I'm kind of surprised to see him up this high, but I understand the talent, and usually we like to lean in the direction of talent when it comes to, players in this situation. But again, I think you have to consider like who can help me right now. And that's not going to be Rashee Rice for a little while here.
I wouldn't plan on Rashee Rice helping your fantasy teams until Thanksgiving. Like that's my target date. Like if you can get him scoring points and being a starting worthy receiver by Thanksgiving, to me, that's a win. That's just my expectation as we go into 2025. Kate, let's talk about Sam Darnold, who is going to have quite the wild 2025 with a postseason appearance and free agency coming up. We'll discuss his dynasty value next. This episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Get ready to tackle the NFL action with FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook, because right now, new customers can bet $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if you win. The FanDuel Sportsbook app gives you everything you need to place live bets on the NFL all in one place. So when you get a hunch in the middle of the game, you can check out the latest stats, view live play-by-play, and so much more on the same page where you place your bets. Just visit fanduel.com to join today. You'll get started with $150 in bonus bets if you win your first $5 bet. That is fanduel.com. Never waste a hunch and make every moment more with FanDuel, an official sportsbook partner of the NFL. Welcome back to the Locked On Dynasty Football Podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the new Locked On NFL show. 2 shows every single day, one in the morning with Tyler Rowland, one in the afternoon with Tony Wiggins, available wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Kate, let's talk about Sam Darnold, who has been downright awesome this season for the Vikings, a renaissance season for him. However, dynasty managers aren't really buying it. QB 26 in dynasty leagues. What is your thought here?
I think there is a reasonable expectation that he's going to outperform that over the next couple of seasons. Now, it's kind of hard. I think a big part of that, like, lack of willingness to buy in is probably in part due to the fact that, like, yeah, we don't know the future of Sam Darnold. Also, like, we have seen kind of, moments, flashes of old Sam Darnold. Like, it hasn't all been completely picture perfect, but most of it has. And you look at the potential for a long-term deal. Like, I don't think a 3-year, $120 million contract is out of play for Sam Darnold here as he hits free agency. And that money is going to talk. Now, whether or not he plays as well as he does underneath a coach that's not Kevin O'Connell, without these all-pro playmakers flying around the field, I don't know. But I do think there's also some merit, kind of like the anti-Anthony Richardson right now, where, like, if this dude's going to get paid, and we think he's going to get a reasonable shot as a starter for the foreseeable future in whatever respective offense, that could be valuable, especially in like a super flex league when his value is still pretty minimal.
So I have a couple thoughts here. First and foremost, do you think it is a lock that he doesn't return to the Vikings next year?
I am not convinced that. So here's the thing. Would the Vikings probably love to, like, slate him in on a cheap deal? Yes. But, like, why would Sam Darnold take a cheap deal? I understand the idea that, like, maybe he wants to stay in this offensive system that has clicked for him, but I also think you've got a pretty limited, window of time to make money in the National Football League, and money talks. And I think Sam Darnold's going to want to get paid. He's coming off a year where he made $10 million on a 1-year contract deal, and he earned significantly more on the Viking side.
But could he take like a 2-year, $80 million deal for Minnesota?
Maybe, but if you're Minnesota, why would you pay that? And that's my big question, because
let's
I get it, but any quarterback that seems to step into Kevin O'Connell's system feels passable. And you still don't know what you have in JJ McCarthy. Like,
let's play this out, because if Minnesota wins their final 3 games of the season, they are the #1 seed in the NFC. They will have a first round bye, and the playoffs will go through them. I'm not predicting that they're going to go to the Super Bowl, but could they make the NFC Championship game with Sam Darnold? Absolutely. I think this is one of the most balanced teams in the league. And if Minnesota reaches the NFC Championship game and they win a couple playoff games, or heaven forbid they go to the Super Bowl, right? It's going to be awfully hard to be like, hey, Sam, we know you had a great year, but let's go have this rookie quarterback who's not 100% healthy. I think there is a situation where he could take a 2-year deal. JJ McCarthy would still have a couple years left on his contract. It wouldn't be all that different from the Aaron Rodgers, Jordan Love situation, where Aaron Rodgers was won 2 MVPs while Jordan Love was sitting on the bench. I'm just not completely ruling it out that he comes back. However, I do think Sam Darnold, I think he's going to be really picky with his next spot, Kate. I don't necessarily think
Like he should be.
Yeah, and I think he should be. I think Sam Darnold's a pretty smart guy. I don't think he's going to be chasing money. Obviously, he's going to want to get a big deal, but like if the situations are come take $45 million from the Titans or come take $40 million from the Rams after Matt Stafford just retired, I got to assume that Sam is going to make the right choice there. I think the Colts are another situation who we mentioned earlier. I think with Michael Pittman, with AD Mitchell, with that running game, I think that makes a lot of sense. So I have a hard time seeing Sam Darnold in a better situation than he's in right now, but I don't think he's going to put himself in a bad situation in 2025, which makes me want to buy him.
Yeah, and I think that's fair. And like you said, I think probably at this point, like in Sam Darnold's career, I think he probably has a better understanding of what offensive systems are going to work for him. And this time he gets to choose, right? I'm sure if he had the chance to have picked his draft landing spot, it probably wouldn't have been with the Jets. I don't think anybody would want to be drafted to the Jets. Woody Johnson just came out with a report from The Athletic that he didn't want to trade for Jerry Jeudy because of a Madden rating. I don't think anybody's going to be choosing the New York Jets for a very long time. So,
No.
let's forget the start of his career. Then, like Carolina Panthers, like
I know.
I think he's going to want to go to an offensive system that he knows is going to complement the things that he has done well to this point in this career. And yeah, he's, I think, going to have the luxury of getting to choose.
Well,
And I think he's going to have plenty of options.
let me just give you some quarterbacks that I think are ludicrous that are ahead of him. Geno Smith, who's 34. I would just rather have Sam Darnold right now. Russell Wilson, who's 36 and who is a free agent after this year. Russell's played well this year, but he's not necessarily somebody that's putting up big fantasy points for you. Even someone like Tua. I'm a big Tua fan. I don't trust Tua to stay healthy. I would rather have Sam Darnold. I think Sam Darnold as QB 26 is laughable. I think he should be at least 6, 7, 8 spots ahead of that.
And if you're in a single quarterback league, you're not going to be concerned with Sam Darnold. I understand that. But if you were in a super flex league or a 2 quarterback format, there's probably no more perfect QB2 right now than Sam Darnold.
Correct.
That's as affordable as Sam Darnold is.
Absolutely. All right. That is it for today's show. We want to thank you for making Locked On Dynasty Football your first listen of the day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to break down this AFC West matchup between the Broncos and Chargers on Thursday Night Football. Okay, we've got like football all week. We've got football on Thursday, Saturday between the NFL and college, Sunday's full slate of action. Monday, we've got a Saints Packers, not great. And then, of course, Wednesday football on Christmas Day should be a lot of fun. Yeah, marathon. This is what I call don't get divorced week when it comes to the NFL. Make sure you're following Kate on Twitter at Kate Majuk. I'm at Marcus _Mosher, and we will see you right back here tomorrow.